Well, welcome back to another Monday Night Bitcoin. George here with my friend Brian.
What's up, everybody?
We are excited to talk to newbies in the Bitcoin space. We've gotten a few great emails from people who have been diving into the last few weeks. And this week, we're just going to take some time to answer some common questions that we're hearing from people who are brand new to Bitcoin, who don't know anything about what the nature of it is, why it's such a unique innovation. So, Brian, let's just kick it off with some questions that we've been seeing.
Let's do it. We got 5 good questions. Okay. What are your thoughts on other cryptocurrencies? What are the pros and cons?
Oh man, this is a good one. So it's important to say that we are intentionally just talking about Bitcoin here because there's a lot of things that are really confusing out there, and other cryptocurrencies, whether you call them altcoins or shit coins, like whatever the terminology is, we're really focused on Bitcoin, the OG, the original protocol that has so many unique aspects to it that other coins, frankly, just don't even come close to comparing to. So my thoughts on other coins is that it's not worth anybody's time really to dive into, and that's coming from a place of experience and kind of getting burned myself, and kind of spending a lot of time, wasting a lot of time, reading a lot of white papers and things that really didn't end up going anywhere. And that's kind of the pattern that we've seen, is that every altcoin is a copy of Bitcoin. So it's important to note that they all came after, years after the original protocol. So if you're just getting new into the space, what I would recommend is just make sure you understand BTC, Bitcoin, understand the origin story, understand as much as you can about it before spinning your wheels on anything else. What do you think, B?
Totally. I echo all of that. And so other cryptocurrencies don't make a meaningful improvement on the national currencies that we already have in the world. So national currencies, they're for money in the world, right? There's gold, there's political currencies that are made by governments, and now there's Bitcoin and then cryptocurrencies, right? Like that's kind of the big 4 buckets, right? And so think about it like that. Gold, we don't go around talking about monetary metals. Like we talk about gold. And so that's kind of the same way it is with Bitcoin. We don't go around talking about cryptocurrencies. We're talking about Bitcoin. And the reason is because the other ones don't really make a meaningful improvement on the other national currencies. And so what's wrong with national currencies? They're centralized. Like their supply is controlled by politicians and by governments, and therefore by people in power that are, and what happens with people in power? Like we go over this a lot on the channel. It's like they have sometimes not the correct incentives to help others and to kind of help society keep moving. And so that's the way that I easily lay out why I don't spend time working on other altcoins, is because the reason why I like BTC is because it makes a meaningful improvement on, what's already happening. And so pros and cons, I would say, look at how centralized it is, or who controls kind of other currencies that you're looking into, and look at that even on your national currencies. Do that same kind of thought process on anything you're choosing to use as money and choosing to use as an investment.
Yeah, I'll add a couple of quick things too. So Ethereum obviously is one that you're going to hear about a lot, and there's a ton of work and investment going into Ethereum that, again, from my own personal point of view, seems like we're spinning our wheels trying to solve a problem that we don't have yet, when really we should be focusing all that energy on fixing the foundation of the current economic system by just focusing on the original Bitcoin protocol. But there are some things that are tempting to sort of start paying attention to, because they're a little bit they're ideas that are ahead of their time, right? Like it would be like if we were in the early days of the internet, and someone started working on Uber when AOL was people were just starting to figure out what AOL was. It's like, Uber, that's not, that's still years down the line. So that's kind of how I see it, is maybe there's room for further innovation way down the line, but right now we really just kind of need to get everyone in one camp and figure out the baseline monetary policy.
Totally. There's nothing wrong with innovation. Like George and I are not against innovation, and Bitcoiners are not against innovation. We're very, very, very pro innovation. What we're against is money printing. We're against money printing, whether it's crypto money printing or political money printing, any kind of money printing, because it's that kind of, it's that leads to systematic unfairness.
Mm-hmm.
That's the main problem. And so, whatever else you're interested in, computers or technology or different apps on your phone or whatever, all that stuff's awesome. Don't look to replace anything else you're interested in. Add Bitcoin to it, and add in your understanding of the downsides of having centralized money printing.
Yep. And then the last thing on this question, I think someone asked a specific question about the forks. So
Yeah.
BCH, BSV, those were what's called forks from the original Bitcoin protocol. So what happened is there was a fundamental disagreement in sort of the Bitcoin community among miners, among developers and users, node operators, and they forked. They literally split the chain, and BTC went this way, BCH went this way. And I think one thing that's helpful for the journey of understanding Bitcoin is going back and kind of understanding the history and seeing what was at the root of that dispute, and who went this way, and why BTC is still the most dominant by a lot. It's hovering over $9,000, where BCH is a couple $100, and the fundamentals just aren't there. But I think from a history standpoint, and to just kind of understand what's going on, it is good to kind of know the story, if nothing else. But just stick to BTC as what you want to invest in, and where you want to put kind of your hope for undermining the current corruption that we see in our system.
Totally. The questions about forks are good. Like, and because politics is a thing that happens when humans live in community. Like, we're not naive here saying that, Bitcoin is going to solve everything, and, the issue of politics and humans living in community are going to be gone, because that's not true. But if the world ran on a more transparent, a more fair money, politics and people of differing incentives will have a more equal playing field for, coming to the market and deciding what they should work on day to day. And so that is exactly what happened with those forks, was that there was a political disagreement, and they chose to go in a different direction, that no longer all the computers that were running Bitcoin software no longer can run that software. They would have to make an upgrade. And so we want development on Bitcoin to be backwards compatible. We don't want to break network effects, because we're trying to change, the underlying thing of the entire world. And so when some of these other forks that you will hear about, that's what they did. They fundamentally changed the software against, kind of what everyone else had agreed to.
Great question.
Good to leave it?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Great question. Okay. What do skeptics say about Bitcoin?
Well, first of all, they laugh at Bitcoiners. They think we're crazy, which we kind of are. Let's be honest. But I think it's a really good question, and it's important. And one of the things I appreciate about a lot of people in the Bitcoin community is they take skepticism head on, and they do a lot of what's called steel manning when you're debating people, and that's really finding the best arguments against it and why it won't work, and kind of trying to expose the holes in it. And there's a lot of really bad ones out there. But then there's ones that I think are helpful to really examine. I think one of the most common ones is, what if the government just decides to shut it down? If the U.S. government, if you're in the U.S., this is one that you ask a lot. Is like, if the government just sees the threat that Bitcoin is to its power, won't it just shut it down? And the concern is very real. And the government already actually is trying to do everything that it can to stifle this innovation that it deems a threat. But it's also important to realize that governments are they're parts of the whole puzzle. Like, they have to play the game too. And so governments with the Bitcoin protocol have to be really careful not to overstep and not to breach the potential for individuals to have sovereignty, because that will create competition in other countries. So in other words, let's say the US government gets really aggressive in how it regulates Bitcoiners, or how it taxes it, or how it surveils it. Well, other countries might see that and be like, that's an opportunity, and we're going to become this Bitcoin friendly country and start to try to attract Bitcoiners from the United States. So that's one thing. The other thing is, it's really, it's not like gold, where the government can issue an executive order like it did not that long ago. I don't remember the year off the top of my head, but where the government literally confiscated people's gold. It's a lot harder.
6102.
Yep.
So order 6102, 1933.
1930. Why don't you take it from there then?
Yeah, I want to come back to your second one that you were just going into about the physicality, I think, is where you were going. Mm-hmm. But the government one is the top one that I hear from people too, as far as skeptics of it. And the good thing, because and I see this as a positive development. Bitcoin has been around for 11 years now. And so a lot of the kind of technology arguments, like, you want to talk about kind of software and scaling and just users and managing your addresses and wallets is hard. That's all there, and that'll be there because all of us have different levels of comfortability with computers and comfortability with smartphones. But if you're feeling like that's kind of your barrier, I want you to know that that's a barrier that we can get you over, and that lots of people can help get you over. That does not have to be. There's people that are working every day on making that part better, and so that does not have to be something that keeps you trapped. And because we can talk, a fun thing that we're doing with our store is solving that physical aspect of it too, and so we can talk about that later. But specifically about 6102. Bitcoin can both be physical and digital. And so because it can be digital means that the government cannot issue a 6102 and take the gold back. And so in that sense, society and technology really is moving forward and giving people the ability to hold their wealth and hold their value, outside of the threat of physical seizure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And there's more, obviously. Skeptics have a lot of different questions and concerns about where this thing goes. But let us know which ones you're hearing. We'd love to take it up on a future episode.
Yep. We're always down to talk to skeptics. We love skeptics. Okay. This is big. Will early Bitcoiners just become the new Rockefellers?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that one in various ways. It's the inequality question. It's are we just repeating a new cycle? Is this just going to replace fiat and become the new tool of oppression? And I think it's a valid concern, but it's really one that comes, I think, from a misunderstanding of how new Bitcoins are created compared to how fiat money is printed. And then subsequently, not just the practical how it gets done, but subsequently what happens with those freshly minted bits of currency. So it's really, really important to understand that when you hear about the government, for example, creating $6 trillion out of thin air for bailouts, what happens next is the most important thing. And what happens is there's a small group of people that get to decide how that money gets divvied out. And so that piece of it is where it's sort of the Rockefeller, Vanderbilts, that question comes into play. Is those families have been around for generations, and they're rubbing elbows with the central bankers who have access to the money printer, and so they get first dibs. It's really that simple. And with Bitcoin, what's fundamentally different is, sure, early adopters, there's going to be wealthy early adopters. That's the game here. Like the people who got in really, really early, and it's still really, really early, by the way. So even right now, the people who are getting in right now are in the future going to be wealthy. Like that's the bet. But the difference is they're not going to have access to the money printers, the Bitcoin printers, so to speak, in the same way. And so in order for their Bitcoin to actually have value, they're going to have to exchange it in the real world, in the market. And they can only hoard a certain amount of it. Otherwise, it just begins to lose its value. So there's a lot of angles to this, but the most important thing, I think, is that separation from arbitrary money printing and distribution.
Totally. The path that you can go to start working on the inequality question in your own head is to understand that there's a difference in the new world. In the new world, there's a difference between having a lot of money and having access to power, because we're separating powerful humans from the ability to create new money. That is the revolution. That is fundamentally what's changing. That's why this is different. That's why we're sitting here talking to you, is because we're separating money printing from powerful people that are able to control the path of that money. Because in the old world, those two are the same things. And so you have people that get unfairly wealthy because of their access to power. In the new world, we're separating money printing from the sources of power.
Yeah, and I want to say two more quick things about that. If you're sort of exploring Bitcoin and you're asking that question, I think it's a great question, and I think it's important to recognize that you're still very early. And so another way to answer that question is there is going to be a new class of wealthy people. That is true, and who knows how they'll spend their wealth or all that kind of stuff. But as Brian said, they're going to be separated from the power in a different way. Now, if you are here and you're asking that question, you have an opportunity to participate in this new world. And what that means is if you just accumulate a little bit and you're making this bet that it's going to be this new class of billionaires or whatever, you get to be a part of that, which means that you get to be a part of whatever that new world looks like. You can use your power in whatever benevolent way you want to lift up other people or to redistribute your own wealth in whatever way. Like this is already happening too. There's already wealthy Bitcoiners who are trying their best to make sure that where this goes is it benefits the most people possible, and so they're trying to invest in other companies, or they're creating nonprofits. And so if you're asking that question out of a place of concern, just know that you can actually join in and participate in being a part of the solution yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Circular economy of Bitcoin and a circular economy of grace. That's what we want to preach. Like, absolutely. Okay.
One more?
Two more.
Okay.
Is Bitcoin only successful if the current banking system collapses?
Yeah, this is the question of, it's kind of like a chicken or the egg thing. So it's important to understand that in 2008, 2009, when the financial system was collapsing last time, too big to fail, fire up the money printers, all that kind of stuff. That was the backdrop of Satoshi creating Bitcoin. And it was a response to that egregious money printing. So it was presented as a solution to this problem that was, had been going on really for decades, but it seemed like 10 years ago was really starting to ramp up and wasn't going to go away. And so Bitcoin exists as a response to the irresponsibility, but I don't think that it is here to aggressively take down the system. It's more like it's an alternative that exists. It's a lifeboat that exists as the system crumbles, and it's not the other way around, if that makes sense. What did I
Totally. No. I think you nailed it. I love that word, aggressive, because Bitcoin doesn't have to be aggressive. Bitcoin is not out to, mess up people's lives or create, a new system, as we just talked about. Bitcoin is software. Bitcoin exists and is doing its thing. And it's up to all of us to join in and be a part of the, Bitcoin economy, and be a part of, trying to influence Bitcoin development in the future. That's why we're here, because we want to be a part of the Bitcoin economy, and we want to be a part of influencing Bitcoin development into the future. That's the awesome thing about software, is that we can all input. It's just like think about your favorite app on your phone. You can tweet the company and say, hey, this is a new feature I'd love to see. We are used to providing, we're used to giving feedback and asking for new features at our app companies. But and then think about the response you get from those companies, and then think about the response you get from the central bank or from Bank of America or Chase when you, hey, suggest new features. Hey, maybe not locking my debit card from the ATM would be a great feature. And then think about the responses that you get. Bitcoin is just software. Bitcoin is happening. And so you're not late, and you can be a part of it. And no, we're not rooting for the system to collapse. The system, like George said before we got on, the system's doing a pretty good job of doing that. The system is collapsing underneath its own choices. And we are choosing to participate in a different economy. Mm. So let's wrap up with this, because a lot of people say this. Is it already too late?
No, not at all. It's really quite early. And this is the hardest one, I think, to wrap our heads around. And this is where you have to have a long view, and you can't worry too much about volatility of the price and all that kind of thing, and have to have your motivation really well aligned, and understand the things that are sort of happening outside of Bitcoin to understand the value of what's happening inside of Bitcoin. If you look around the world right now, in a lot of ways, things are the macro factors are crazier than they've ever been, with coronavirus, with riots, the election coming up, our political divide, currencies collapsing all over the world, Lebanon, Zimbabwe. There's a third one that's experiencing some hyperinflation right now. The U.S. is not immune from any of this, and it's going to be the strongest. It's going to last the longest because it's the global reserve currency. But it's not too late, and all you have to do is turn on the news or scroll through Twitter and recognize that things are just ramping up. And so, yeah, the price relative to the U.S. dollar today is $9,000 or so, and you could have maybe got in if you had 10 years ago heard about it and got in at a couple bucks or whatever. And did you miss that cycle? Yes, it's not. Those days are over. It's not going back down. But it's definitely, there's still a ton of room on the upside to where these are the early days. This is the AOL days of Bitcoin.
Yeah. It's not too late. Like look at the amount of views like on our video. Like it's not too late. Like you're asking the right questions, and you can choose to be involved at any level that you want. I would definitely encourage you to join in.
No doubt. Thanks for the questions, and thanks for tuning in. Like we're trying to do a better job of honing in our message to the audience of people who are brand new. We're recognizing more and more, really ever since we started the show, how many conversations we're having, how many people are approaching us to talk about Bitcoin in ways where the content market really doesn't address. So your questions are super helpful in refocusing us back to the basics as much as possible. So appreciate it.
Two ways you can get involved. Go to bitcoinis.com/start. And we have a curated list of, apps you can download, things you can buy, things you can read, and go through that list and pick, next steps that you want to take on your own.
We'll see you here next week.
Hey, if you made it this far, thanks for hanging out with us today. Do all the good stuff. Hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, hit the bell next to the subscribe button, and leave us a comment. Tell us where you're at in your Bitcoin journey.
Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week on Monday Night Bitcoin.